Welcome. You are listening to the Be a Better Being podcast, hosted by Michelle Zellner and Sasha Berscheid. Michelle and Sasha are here to give you information and inspiration to help you live your healthiest, happiest lives. Thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoy the show.
Greetings. Thank you for tuning in to the Be a Better Being podcast. I'm Michelle Zellner, your host. I have two of my favorite people with us today. Sasha, my co-host. How's it going, girlfriend?
Hello, everyone. So glad to be here.
Super glad to have you here. And I know you and I are both very excited about our guest. So I'm going to let you introduce her.
Yes. So I am a huge fan and cheerleader and supporter for our lady of the hour. This is Jessi. Jessi is our behind the scenes everything. Emailer, content, like puts all of our podcasts together. She is the reason why we sound wonderful, and she is so empowering and so supportive. And recently was, digging into her. And, even at that, we'll even talk about that, but you were uncovering your you, I guess is what I should say. And through your uncovering and your discovery phases, you started to question yourself on who am I and what makes me tick and what makes me different, and why do I maybe not relate to some things, and why do I feel this isn't applicable to me. And so Jessi went and got a diagnosis and just got tested for autism. And so she received a late adult or early adult, I guess I should say, because you're definitely not late. That's one of the things that I admire the most about you, is that you're sprightly and you're young and you're motivated, but you received a later diagnosis for autism. Is that right?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. And then through all of this self-discovery, and this is why I kind of had a little backup moment there, is that you also realize that your pronouns are her and they. Is that correct?
Yes.
That was a part of the self-discovery and all that stuff too. I think these are important things to call out to people, because we're so used to the whole she, he, but then, like the other day I went to Walgreens and I said, "Oh yeah, girl." And then I realized that wasn't being respectful of the person that I was picking up the prescription from. And so I think it's also important to call out, and I want to dig a little bit into this on your they, them. But most importantly today, I'd love to highlight who you are, what you do, how you became passionate about the podcast. Did you stumble into this? And then lastly, what really pushed you into getting that diagnosis?
Okay. Well, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here on the other side of the camera, as Michelle phrased it earlier.
Mm-hmm. How does it feel? How does it feel to be on this side?
It's a little awkward, but I've watched so many interviews, and I had my own podcast for a while. I was just, no co-host, just by myself, no interviews. So it's a little weird, but I'm also like, I can do this. It's fine.
Oh, you totally can do this, of course. So I like everyone to have a nice solid foundation of background information. So let's give the basics: who you are, where you live, and then how you got into this whole podcast producing thing and being a business owner at a very young age. Let's dive into all of that, and how maybe working through some of those things professionally offered you this idea to try to figure yourself out personally.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so I'm Jessi. I'm in the Denver metro area, and I got into podcasting. For me, this actually started as an unpaid internship right out of college. So, 9 months out of college, because I graduated in the middle of the pandemic. So it was hard to find a job doing anything at that point, being put on furlough from the job that I was working and stuff like that. But I got into this as an unpaid internship, and things kind of blossomed from there. The guy I was working for was like, "Hey, you're really good at," and ended up promoting me to like his sort of like a manager director position. And then he ended up wanting to take his company another direction. And we ended up working out a deal where I essentially bought the podcast part of his company from him to do it on my own. And I changed the name and did some other stuff with the business to make it my own. But yeah, it was I kind of stumbled into it a little bit, but only because I was so good at it.
Okay. One of the most important things that I want to call out is your age and also your educational background, because you have mentioned it to me before of how you were gifted, or you're just kind of like, okay, well, when I was in school and then definitely in high school, I like could get stuff done, and then I was like, okay, what's next? So one of the reasons why I admire you so much is because you are how old?
I am 24. I turned 25 in 2 weeks.
I just love that. And tell me a little bit more about like your history with education and what it was like to just, go through school as a person that has so many talents.
Well, school was just really easy for me. I almost skipped 2 grades, but then they held me back because they decided that that might not be good for me, like, emotionally. So, yeah, I almost skipped 2 grades, and then they were like, maybe 1 grade, and then they considered it again the next year, but I ended up just staying where I was. But school was always really easy. The only things that ever got in my way during school were mental health challenges that weren't even about school. So, school was a breeze. I was not very good at gym or PE, though. That was definitely my least favorite subject, but yeah.
Can you dive into a little bit of what some of those mental health challenges were? Obviously, this is May, Mental Health Awareness Month, which is one of the reasons we thought this would be a great conversation to have for this month. But going back, what they were, and were you even at that time diagnosed with anything, or was this just stuff you tried to figure out on your own? Like, talk about that piece of it.
Yeah. So when I was in high school and middle school, I struggled with depression, anxiety, and an eating disorder. I got diagnosed with anorexia when I was 17, and then also with depression and anxiety and PTSD. So I ended up dealing with quite a lot and getting diagnosed with a lot at a pretty, I think most people don't end up getting their diagnoses when they're still a teen. So I feel like I'm very lucky that I started my mental health journey so early. But yeah, I was dealing with an eating disorder, depression, and the eating disorder and depression would build off each other, because your nutrition affects your brain so much. And the anxiety and dealing with post traumatic stress disorder from some events in early childhood and not knowing that that was PTSD and thinking it was just anxiety and having a lot going on.
I have a feeling a few of our guests have also maybe inspired you to figure some of this out, because a lot of our guests we talk about, right, going back and uncovering the root of why this is happening. What was it like as a teenage girl? And I mean, we're not talking that very far away, right? You're 24, which in my world is baby. So this has been a conversation that I think as a society we have been having way more frequently and openly in these recent years. It certainly wasn't a conversation my generation ever had. It's a little bit more of a normal conversation these days. So even 6 or 7 years ago, once you maybe kind of got to put some labels on some things, did that help with, how you then went went about figuring out what to do with it? Were you supported? What did that family support dynamic look like? Your friend circle? What did that all look like?
It definitely helped because without the labels, I would not have known where to start or like what even to begin doing. And that's kind of how I ended up getting diagnosed, was like talking to my mom, being like, I don't know what's going on with me. I don't know what's wrong. And I did have a lot of family support. I was very lucky in that both my parents were super open to mental health. They'd both been to therapy before, and my parents are boomers. So that's saying a lot, I feel like, for that generation where it was never talked about. So I was very lucky to have a lot of support from my parents and my family in figuring it all out. And I had a lot of great support from my friends too. But it was also very intimidating for sure to sort of be thrown into this essentially like a whole new world and have to learn a lot while also, trying to heal at the same time. And I think therapy and physical therapy are very similar because they're both painful. Like therapy, you don't always go to therapy and feel good. Sometimes like you have to do things that are really, really hard. And it was definitely difficult to sort of get thrown into that.
Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like going through college
Mhm.
during the COVID era? And like, did it cause you to graduate early, or what was like, I'm just going to spitfire a bunch of questions for you. What was college like in general without the diagnosis? Now that I should probably cut these up. Okay. What was it like to be in college during the COVID era? We'll start there.
Well, so COVID started my final semester of college. So I remember like coming back from winter break and then going to spring break and then kind of getting an email that was like, "Hey, don't come back." And wondering like, "Oh, okay." And I was a film production major, so I had to be on campus a lot to like use the equipment and use the cameras. It definitely changed college for me. I didn't get to do like my final project the way I wanted. I had to shoot all my films on my phone. And getting into the groove of like now we do everything on Zoom, it was very weird. It was so easy to, at least for me at the time, it was easy to forget that I was supposed to be on a Zoom class because I would get super focused on something else. And then I would be like, oh no, I'm supposed to be in class. And then I also worked full time all through college. And there was a period of time where I was having Zoom classes, but I wasn't working. And that was really weird for me to not be going to work while I was doing all of this. And then eventually we came back from furlough because I was a barista and they decided coffee was essential. But going to college in the pandemic was really, really weird. And I think I thought a lot about like, wow, that was only one semester of my life. But for some of these kids, for the freshmen, this is going to be years of their education. And I think it would have been really difficult to go back to regular school after doing online school.
Absolutely. During college, in hindsight or looking back, do you see any tips or tricks that you can give people, or just flags maybe of, I wish I would have paid attention more in this area mental health wise?
Yeah, I didn't make very many friends in college, and I wish I had put more effort into making friends. Because at least for me, the people around me don't dictate my mental health, but can influence it a lot. And like having a support system is so important. I think also I was always trying to do too much at the same time. So like giving yourself a break and maybe in high school, for example, everything was really easy and you could do all the things, but college is going to be different and you're going to have so many more responsibilities on top of everything else that you're doing. You're not going to be able to do all the things anymore.
I want to touch back on something that you mentioned when, the anorexia and the depression feed off each other. And what Sasha and I talk about all the time about the foundational necessities of how to make a human thrive. You are what I call the YBI, the young, beautiful, and invincible category, where maybe we feel like, we don't need to worry about what we eat or exercise or sleep, because look at us, we're fine, we're great, nothing impacts us. As somebody who recognizes that those things impact everything, did that, I don't know, maybe inspire you to really take charge of your daily habits and the choices you make in order to help feed your mental health?
Yes, but not until more recently. Even though I knew those things, it took kind of a long time for them to actually land and like make an impact on what I was doing because I think it's a lot harder to be conscious about those things when you're still really like in the depression or really in the eating disorder. It's a lot more difficult to make those conscious healthy choices, and I think it took me a while to feel like I could make them.
I'm so proud of you. I'm so incredibly proud
Thank
of you.
you.
Like, I just, even listening to you, I'm like, wow, I'm so, so proud of you for so many things.
Yeah. Because Sasha and I talk about this all the time because you're literally on every call with us. You hear us talk about these things all the time, that when you neglect to give a human what it needs in order to thrive, it is not going to thrive. And then a lot of times we're giving it things that are actually causing it harm. And if we already have an underlying challenge, whether it's a physical health challenge, a mental health challenge, and then we give it things that cause it harm, it's usually going to make it worse. So it does end up being this really yucky snowball that gains momentum very, very rapidly. So, how do you start to bring the snowball back uphill? What are, maybe there is somebody who's in your cohort who is struggling with their mental health and, they don't see the value of really making an effort of making friends or changing their dietary habits or getting outside and getting some sunshine and moving their bodies. What are maybe from the person who's done it and who's trying to go through that now, what are some tips you can give to anybody who is kind of stuck in that difficulty just to get the momentum going?
I think my biggest tips would be to start small. You don't have to make a huge, major lifestyle change overnight. It can be like one of your meals a week. You actually look at the macros and make sure you're getting enough nutrition. It can be like, it can start like that. It can start with like, well, this meal, I'm going to make sure that I'm getting protein and fiber and, the right amount of carbs and stuff like that. It can start as easy as one meal a week. It doesn't have to be like a snap of your fingers, everything is different. It's really hard to break habits, and you shouldn't expect to break them all overnight. And the same with like exercise, like you can start with just going on a walk. That might not be what you end with, but like start with going on a walk on your lunch break or something. And then like you'll feel so much better just from that one thing that you'll want to try more and you'll want to go bigger.
You're such a wise soul, my dear Jessi. I love seeing you grow, and even in this past year, just watching you unfold into you has been awesome. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, you can see my beautiful Jess. I always feel kind of bad commenting on your beauty but I know that you accept it, but you know how to express yourself and you trust yourself to express yourself. When did this start? When did you start diving into expressing yourself, your inner self outwardly?
That's always been kind of an off and on thing for me. It's always been something that I've done. I just used to tone it down a lot more, I think, because I wanted to be professional or I wanted to be this or that. And then I was like, I own the business that I'm trying to be professional at. And if my clients don't like it, they don't have to work with me. Like it's that easy. So for me, it was always something I had experimented with like my whole life. I was into fashion when I was like 7. I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm wearing these two things together because they both have sparkles on them and it's a sparkle day." So, yeah,
And everything's better with bling. So
exactly.
I fully support that. Love it. Let's go into this recent diagnosis of autism and let's talk about just what even the testing looked like. What made you think I should get tested for autism and kind of go through those steps. And then as an adult receiving this diagnosis, how has that impacted you now going forward?
Yeah. Well, so I had questioned if I had autism before because I really struggle in some social situations, and it's a lot easier like through a screen like with you two. It's a lot easier for me to like feel like I'm saying the right thing and being social and doing the small talk. But there have been social situations where I did not know what I was doing or what I was saying or what to say or what to do. And so for me, it started with realizing that I had some social challenges. And I don't have social anxiety, I'm an extrovert. So I was very confused as to why some social situations threw me off so much and why I couldn't understand what was going on. And then it actually from there, I kind of was like, "Oh, I don't know. I don't think so." And then I was talking to a friend who got diagnosed and she pulled me aside and she was like, all of like a bunch of the reasons that were listed as like why I got diagnosed are things we have in common. So you should probably get checked out. So for me, the biggest thing I noticed was the social challenges. I also struggle a lot with sensory issues and like routine. But I just thought, I'm just particular, or I just know how I like things, or I'm just bossy, or something like that was always what I got growing up was, oh, you're just bossy. So it started with recognizing I didn't socialize the same way other people did.
And I would say that self-recognition is relatively rare. Is that a fair statement?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Sasha, maybe you know a little more on that. I mean, obviously, with a daughter who has autism, and I mean, she's a child, so I wouldn't expect her to be self aware. But I think to Jesse's point, that we dismiss it as something else, or we just decide that we're just really picky, or we are particular, or I would imagine too, maybe, Jesse, that this is one of the reasons you didn't take the initiative to make friends in college.
Oh,
Is
definitely.
Right. So the thing can contribute to other things, and then these things also kind of feed and foster the condition. Sasha, what do you know just about, obviously there's degrees, right, on the spectrum of autism, and maybe the self-awareness can occur at a certain level on the spectrum and not at another level.
Yeah, I also think, well, I'm not an expert by any means in any of this. This is a brand new realm or territory to me, but yes, like you said, there's so many different realms or different spectrums, different levels, degrees. But I think my opinion is that we teach these individuals who have autism or their brains work differently how to what is called mask. So we teach these individuals how to mask all their life. In other words, how to quote unquote be normal. There's no such thing as normal. Okay. But I think that we as society ask individuals to be a certain way so that we can all, like, just move through the day to day and the flow and the process. And because of that, we are teaching individuals to not be themselves, and instead we're teaching them to mask. And I think that if a lot of people just took a step back and asked themselves the questions, like I have personally taken the autism, just not anything professional, but online, because I see so many similarities in myself and my daughter. I'm like, am I autistic? But I think a lot of it is some people might have autistic tendencies. Some people have autism, but have been taught how to mask. Masking is just basically how can you act quote unquote normal, even though there is no normal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And as you and I have been talking for a long time, is when you can't be your authentic self, it's going to then fester into maybe something like an eating disorder or an alcohol addiction or social anxiety or withdrawing from society, right? So we're going to look for something to make us feel better because we're not being who we are, and that doesn't feel good. So let me do something to either distract me from not feeling good or to find something to make me feel better. Jessie, does any of this kind of help you connect some of those dots from early childhood? Just, you didn't just magically become autistic at 24, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
It
Yeah.
definitely connects some of the dots. Oh,
Yeah.
definitely.
And I think, I mean, there are certain cases where putting a label on something isn't really necessary. A lot of times it's not. But when it comes to trying to figure out what is going on, having something tangible to say, oh, it's this, that is so critical for empowerment, right? Otherwise, you just feel like you're a weirdo, or, I'm the only one who goes through this. And it feels very isolating. And like maybe there's no hope or there's nothing you can do about it. So now that you have that diagnosis, what and how have things changed for you?
Well, so the first thing I did was tell my family and my close friends so that we could all sort of have this group understanding of, oh, okay, that's what's been going on. And at first, my family was a little surprised. And then my mom started to connect the dots and she was like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. And then my dad was like, I was tested for autism when I was a child. And we were like, oh, you were? And, but that was back in like the 60s. And they were just like, can he do math? He's fine. Like, so, but it connected dots for everyone else too. And then also being able to come to my friends and be like, hey, so here's what's going on. Because I had always had somewhat tense friendships. I'm really good at accidentally offending people. And to have that, like, there's a reason why I do that. And it doesn't mean that you can't be offended, but it does mean that, like, if you tell me what I said wrong, I will never say it again. You just have to communicate a little bit more than you might with someone else. And that has made my friendships much easier. And then also getting into, like, finding community with other adults on the spectrum and reading some books and looking at, like, there are tons of support groups I found out, and trying to look at what other options there are out there for me. Because I work for myself, I don't need accommodations in the workplace, but my assessor was like, that's one of the reasons that makes me think you're autistic, is that you thrive in an environment where you don't have any coworkers, where you set your whole routine. And yeah.
I'm so stinking proud of you. I'm so
Thank
stinking
you.
proud of you. Like, there's just there's so many levels to there's so many things to be proud of. Not only did you graduate during COVID, and then you found you and started your own company, and then you continued to deep dive into your mental health, and every day, every time I see you, you just are genuinely striving to become a better being, the best version of yourself, and it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful to watch you unfold.
Thank you.
I agree. It absolutely is. And you came to us telling us this and offering to come on the show and talk about it. And this is so huge because I guarantee there are people listening who are now going to be very curious, maybe about themselves or about a friend or a family member, or maybe that random person they run into and they're a little like judgmental about something. Maybe they'll stop and take a pause
Mhm.
and realize, there's probably a reason. You might never know the reason. Maybe that person knows the reason and they're going to feel comfortable opening up to their friends and their family. Because I think too often we just don't talk about these things because we're embarrassed or we feel ashamed or nobody's going to understand. Or now I have a label and that's, somehow like a bad thing. And so just that you were willing to come on and be open and honest and talk about it, I think also is huge. And I know we're incredibly grateful for that. And when we get to have our little interactions before the show and after the show, and in all of our correspondences, it really is it has absolutely been amazing to see you flourish once you got ownership of the company, and now just trying to work to fill in all of these different aspects. It's fantastic. So what does it look like going forward? Right? What, now that you like have a clear picture, how can you, or what do you intend to do to set yourself up to truly be able to thrive?
So the first thing that I'm playing with is trying to learn how to, Sasha talked about masking, trying to learn how to unmask a little bit more, because it is exhausting, but I've been doing it for so long that I don't always know I'm doing it. So trying to learn how to consciously take that step back and just continue to be more authentic is really the first thing that I'm looking at going forward.
Last year, LinkedIn, my employer, had an autism acceptance panel, and they had asked me to speak at it. And one of the final sentiments, or one of the final questions that they asked me was, in the workplace, moving forward, what would you like people to see? And I broke down bawling because this was in the midst of my grieving process with Kyan. So it was a very, very difficult time for me. But when they asked me, what would you like to see for persons that are on the spectrum in the workplace? And the only thing that I can think of, and the only answer to this day, even a year later, if I was to be asked the same question, was, I want you to be kind. I just want you to be kind. I just want people to be kind and to know that we do things for certain reasons, and you don't have to understand those reasons, and just to be kind. And so I love the fact that you're embracing yourself, Jessi. I hope and pray that you are received with kindness. What you do is incredible. I love, if anyone's looking to get a podcast or get information on how to start a podcast, I strongly suggest using Jessi. But my wish for you is that you embrace who you are, continue to deep dive into yours. And then for the listeners that are out there, they're like, well, how can I help? What can I do to learn more about autism? All you have to do is be kind. Literally, that's all it is in any situation, just be kind.
And I'm going to just jump a little bit off of that and say it's not even just people with autism, it's anybody, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we all by nature we are judgmental. That's actually normal human behavior. We hope that if you've been a listener of this podcast, you have recognized that maybe judgmental is not necessary, but let's be curious. Let's ask. Let's be honest, like Jessi said, like, okay, that offended me. Well, tell me why that offended you. Let me learn so I can grow, right? And then how can we work together to get to some kind of really nice common ground? So, the other thing I want to say, and Jessi, maybe you can also tack on to this, is going back to the labels like depression, autism, anxiety, this, that, the other, right? There's a label and a diagnosis for everything. We can know what it is. I'm going to say, and this might be a very unpopular answer, it's not a license then to not do your hard work, in my opinion, right? Let's figure out what it is that is preventing you from living your healthiest, happiest, most full and fulfilling life, and get all the resources and the reach out and all of the things that are available, and then do your work to get to a better place, like Jessi is doing her work. What do you say about that,
I would say
Jessi?
it's actually a reason to do your hard work. Like,
I mean, I love that you believe that. I hope a lot of people do. I've had many people in my life and in the things in the work that I do that it's maybe a reason to not do the hard work. I can't help it. It's just the way I am, right? It's a crutch to not do the hard work. And yet, if you do that hard work, life will be better. There's no doubt about it, right? But it's hard. And sometimes it can be harder than others, right? For Kyan, it's going to be harder than it was for you because she is a way different degree of autistic than you are, right?
yeah.
But I know Kyan's going to do hard work because she has Sasha as a mom. So it's not going to be allowed to not do hard work, right? So yeah, I mean, I hope people believe that. Say it again, just in case somebody didn't hear it, Jessi. Say it again.
It's a reason to do the hard work. And like your hard work might look different from someone else's. Like if you're really struggling with your depression, your hard work can be brushing your teeth. You know, like if that's where you're at, that's where you're at. But taking those little steps is what will get you to the place where if you feel behind, where you catch up with everyone else and even speed ahead of them.
I read something this last year that said, even if all you have is 30% to give, on those days where you only have 30% to give, that's still your 100.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One last call out, and I know that this is a sensitive subject for some, but I think it is something important because this has been a part of your journey. And just like mental health has been something that we just recently started to talk about, especially with COVID, but with and we don't have to go super deep into it, but during the diagnosis, is this when you also started to dive into yourself and give yourself the pronouns her, they? Or did that come before the diagnosis? The reason why I bring this up is because this is actually another I don't want to call it a symptom, but there's a lot of persons that are on the spectrum that feel more like a they them versus a he or a she.
Oh yeah.
Did that come
I
with?
have learned that there's lots of overlap. It actually came before.
Okay.
But then getting the diagnosis kind of like solidified it, I think, because I was just kind of playing around with it. And then getting the diagnosis was like, okay, yeah, like it is maybe normal. There is no normal, as you keep saying, Sasha, but it's not weird that I feel like this. So that came a little bit before.
One of the reasons it means a lot for me to start calling it out now is because I don't know what Kyan's future is going to be, right? I don't know if someday she's going to say, Mom, please stop calling me her or she. So I have to plant the seeds now in my life and have a better understanding of that. But then also, hopefully this allows other persons to allow me to plant those seeds, because I really just want a beautiful future and a beautiful world for Kyan, of that acceptance, the autism acceptance, and all of what that means to be accepted. It's not just, I'm only going to accept this little part of autism. It's accepting all of what is autism and making sure that we can cultivate a world where you feel comfortable, Jessi, to flourish and be your true self.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that sentiment. And I mean, this whole conversation has just been great. Just great. And just so fun to see you in the center of our screen instead of behind the scenes. Before we officially wrap up, Jessi, anything that we haven't touched on that you feel the listeners should know?
I don't think there's anything huge. I do want to say with the autism diagnosis, there are a couple reasons that I flew under the radar. And those reasons were that I don't have any cognitive delays. I'm actually, school is easy. I'm pretty smart. And that I'm a like a woman or a femme, because when I was a kid, they were only looking for like one kind of autism that you see with like little boys. And it's even harder to get diagnosed if you're not white. Like there are all these different factors. So even if you have like an inkling that you don't feel 100% normal or you don't feel like you fit in, like look into it, because even if you don't get diagnosed with autism, there could be something else. And how you're going to know where to start if you don't know what's going on.
It's such a great point. We're going to have some links in the show notes about some of those online resources, right? Just the preliminary, like Sasha did, just to see, be curious. This self-exploration and self-discovery, I personally think that is every individual's number one job, to get to know yourself. And this could be a really good avenue for people to start going down that road. So Jessi, thank you so much for this. Sasha, as always, love you. And so great to see everybody and to get to have this time together. Hopefully people out there, you've gotten a couple of things that are, kind of prickling your brain, and then you'll go and do something to help you be a better being.
Thank you for listening to the Be a Better Being podcast. Michelle and Sasha hope that what you heard today inspires you to embrace this journey of life with an open mind, a kind heart, and a willingness to learn and evolve. If you enjoyed the content, please help spread their message by subscribing, sharing, and leaving a 5-star review. If you have a show topic idea or would like to be a guest, please visit betterbeings.net and fill out a contact form. Until next time, go and be a better being.